Welcome to Flourish-Meant, the podcast on living life as you are meant to, so you can flourish. Welcome, everyone. I have here with me today Chris Manion, an award-winning author, inspirational speaker, and vlogger who developed a $20 million team in the direct sales industry. She's here to talk to us today about limitless living. Welcome, Chris. I'm so glad you're on Flourish-Meant today.
Thanks, Tina. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Tell us what makes you passionate about helping people unblock the obstacles in their lives and begin to live without limits.
Well, it comes from having to do the same thing for myself. I noticed that my thinking was often too limited in terms of the direction I was trying to go in. And I was being my own obstacle course and stubbornly thinking one way and one way only. And as I built a team of entrepreneurs, I saw that reflected in many of them. And so I was really wanting them to have all that was before them. Their potential was just so clear to me. And yet they, even though they were trying to do everything I told them to do, they either didn't believe it or they had these different obstacles that were in their way. And it was all internal. It was all part of their thinking process. And as I learned how to help them, I saw the changes in their lives. And that just spurred me on. I was like, okay, this is a one-on-one thing. It's very similar to what we do in Christian ministry and discipling others to learn about Jesus. There's just some facts, some basic things that can really make a huge change in people's lives. And I was given the privilege of mentoring many of them. And that just, I mean, they've got into, many of them, into six-figure incomes just because they learned to control and manage the way they were thinking and get through those obstacles.
It's amazing to know that what could stand between us and sustainable income and living to our fullest are mental roadblocks. What are some of the common ones that you noticed in the people that you worked with and mentored?
Probably the largest one was low self-esteem, just believing that what others had told them that they were incapable of doing, or that there was such a low threshold of expectation set by people in their early parts of their lives that as adults, they were continuing to believe that. Some of them just didn't know that they could change. They just thought, this is the way I am. And many of them don't understand that their thoughts are separate from who they are. I had the hardest time, I think, getting people to understand that concept, because as they're thinking and the same thought recurs over and over again, they believe that as a truth, that that's just how they are. That's how my mind works. And so they bought into the concept that their thoughts were them. And so to teach them that if they could observe their thoughts, that means they had the ability to step outside of them. So they aren't their thoughts. But that concept was that was a stickler for many people. So not knowing that they can be separate and their identity is separate from how they're thinking was a big obstacle. Some of them didn't want to change, and those you can't do anything about. And some of them were just so focused on themselves that they didn't know how to go outside to help others. And that servant leadership concept, which works so well in Christianity, also works as a business leader. And it helps you sometimes get out of your so focused, almost pharisaical approach to your life. Not narcissistic necessarily, but looking too closely at the small things in life and not broadening out. So learning to broaden and have a more global view. And then just basic faulty thinking or labeling themselves in a way that wasn't really true. And that you can often find help from when you're in large groups where people can I'll go around the room and give you one or two adjectives about yourself, and you go, really? I never thought of myself that way. And that helps change that kind of faulty thinking.
So it sounds like you've come up with three major areas where people get blocked. The first one would be shame and low self-esteem, and the second one would be too much absorption in centering your focus on yourself only without turning your life's purpose outward. And then the third one would be faulty thinking, misplaced, misdirected thoughts, false beliefs. So how do people begin to overcome these major roadblocks in their minds?
For the low self-esteem, some of that is just learning how to talk to yourself in different terms, learning to observe your thoughts and shift them into more affirmative statements. I'm never going to lose weight. I'm so stupid. Any of those I am statements that are in the pejorative and negative thinking need to be recognized first as negative thinking and then labeled as unacceptable. And then the change happens only if we replace it with something more positive. And the Bible's full of I am statements, that how much God loves us, how any affirmative, just I'm working on being a happy person is even better than, this is a miserable life, I'm never going to get anywhere kind of a talking. So low self-esteem has an I am statement that replaces the old negative thinking and a recognition that you are doing negative thinking in the first place. That takes a month or two just to even come to a conscious awareness of how many negative thoughts are in there, and not to be discouraged by that, but just to replace them. And then also to accept compliments. Just even saying thank you when someone compliments you about something is not an easy thing to do when you have low self-esteem. You don't feel that that's a true statement. You think someone's just trying to butter you up. And so you don't accept it. You just go, oh, this old thing, if they were complimenting you on a dress or your makeup, and they go, oh, well, and then you immediately point out what doesn't work. And so instead, just learning to say thank you allows some positive things to come in, and slowly, like water over a rough stone, some of that low self-esteem gets smoothed out. So those are two simple things for people with low self-esteem. Those who are too absorbed in themselves, the easiest thing to do is to find somebody who needs your help. That also is very good when you're feeling low. You're having a blue day, you're having an emotional day, you're just down. My go-to thing is always to go somewhere and do something for somebody. When I turned 30, nobody sent me a birthday card on that day. I got one, I think, the day before my birthday, but on my birthday, nothing came. And I was this big old 30-year-old suddenly, and I had this little redheaded boy at home who was about, I don't know, 2 or so. And I did not want to sit and have a pity party in my house the whole day. So I went and took him to a nursing home. And he just ran up and down the halls and was thrilled with these great big wheels on the wheelchairs. And so, of course, all the people there loved this little redheaded boy who had these big blue eyes, and just thought that their wheelchairs were the coolest thing he'd ever seen. And it just brightened everybody's day and shifted me into a much happier mindset. So those who are too absorbed need to have at least one friend that points out to them that they are so, if they can accept that kind of a truth, and just to go and do something, find or make a list of 2 or 3 things that you can go and do, or a person that you can visit, or something that moves you out of yourself and your own self-absorbed thoughts. And the faulty thinking is, I think that's best helped by someone who's a mentor who can help you recognize the fact that you do have faulty thinking, or you have mislabeled yourself. That isn't always the easiest thing to do on your own. Certainly, there's plenty of books. I read lots to help my team. Norman Vincent Peale had The Whole Power of Positive Thinking, which showed examples of just horrendous true stories that people just picked themselves up and did something positive about it instead of wallowing in misery and tragedy. Jack Canfield has his book, The Success Principles. That gives lots of ways to shift the way you're thinking and take responsibility for having a more positive approach. W. Clement Stone is the father of PMA, positive mental attitude. So there's lots of people that help in that way. But my personal experience is that you need to be around either a mentor or a group of people, like a mastermind group, that are committed to supporting you and helping you and speaking truth to you that needs to be heard. And a gentle, in my case, a Christian approach is always much more pleasant to receive, because we, believe in kindness and compassion, but still speaking truth. And that kind of a mastermind group or a single mentor who can help you recognize where you've labeled yourself in too limited a way, that you're actually capable of much more than you think in most cases.
So just to review, the steps that you mentioned were with low self-esteem. You're going to make some lists. The first list that you would make are the lists of things that you believe about yourself, and finding the ones that are negative and replacing them, or at least reframing them with positive truths about yourself and who you are becoming. And the other one would be a list of things that you do in response to compliments and how to better accept compliments. And that will help you move in the direction of building self-esteem gradually. I'm glad that you said it's not an overnight process, because especially with people who have experienced abuse over many years, it does take some time, sometimes even longer than a couple of months, to undo all of that deep-seated negativity about yourself that you've developed over years. The second place that you were making recommendations is helping us to get outside of ourselves. And I'm glad that you mentioned that this can apply to those who are suffering from depression, or, as I want to add, anxiety, or any of the emotional distraught places that we can find ourselves in, can help us to become more focused on ourselves, but getting out to being a blessing to other people in our communities. And keeping a list handy of places you can go will help you, because you won't be able to think of those in the moment when you need them. So
Right.
I love that you had suggested a list there. And in the last one, I feel like you're asking us to work more with other people, which may apply to all three of those places, in fact.
Mm. I think it does. It certainly is difficult when you live alone or you live in an isolated place. I think that's partly why it's so difficult for battered women, for example, to seek help, because they are trapped and are in a relationship that is very controlling, and they have no other input. And so I just give all credit to anyone that has been able to move themselves away from that kind of a situation for their betterment and for their healthy living, because that isolation feeds into all the negative thinking that goes on in our head. And I'd like to go back for a second and just extend what you said in terms of the low self-esteem piece. It's the negative thoughts are not limited to what we think of ourselves. Negative thoughts can just come about from, here we go again, this dumb situation, or this other person, or why does this keep happening to me? Any of those kinds of thought are negative. They're not necessarily directed at ourselves. And I learned about this from, there's a woman, I think she's a psychotherapist. Her name is Sherry Carter Scott. And if you Google rules of being human, she has these 10 rules. And when I discovered them, the third one said there's no mistakes, there's only lessons. And so that's an example of relabeling something. Instead of calling it a mistake or a whatever negative term, it's a lesson. It's an opportunity to learn something. When I had people calling me on my team, they would always say, okay, we got a problem. And I'd say, let's just call it an opportunity. And that just opens the door to possibilities, instead of in the negative zone of problem being weighty and bad and all the negative energies associated with the word problem. So there's no mistakes, there's only lessons. And then the next one she had was, a lesson is repeated until learned. And I was like, oh no. And so that helped me understand that every time I said, why is this still happening to me? I understood I hadn't learned the lesson yet. And so some of this is again an example of either having a wise mentor helping you learn this, or just reading and discovering for yourself that these things that keep coming up don't have to be labeled in a negative way, but we do have to figure out why we haven't risen above them yet. There's always, God wants us to be happy. He wants us to have his joy. And so when we're stuck somewhere in our thinking or in a negative situation or negative health situations, there's a way to move through it in a way that helps us learn and deepen our heart and our compassion or our understanding for others' sufferings. There's some lesson there in everything, which is a positive way of viewing it instead of labeling it as this thing. And then they never end. Learning lessons goes on for our entire lives. So the people who are in faulty thinking think, I've learned what I need to know now. Now the rest of my life should be, I paid the price of whatever, and now it should be smooth sailing. And that would be a real good example of faulty thinking.
So it sounds like you're talking about self-limiting thoughts, victim
Yes.
mentality,
Yes.
and closed-mindedness as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And to clarify, by victim mentality, I do not mean a person who's been victimized. There are many people who've been victimized that become heroic and triumphant and overcome the obstacles in their lives and become a blessing to the world around them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who blame everyone else and their circumstances and refuse to take responsibility to make changes in their life to move forward past abuse, past negative circumstances. That's victim mentality. Victim mentality lives in blame of the world and does not make changes.
And that's very limiting.
Yes.
Yeah. And until they are willing to make that change, and a lot of times it's difficult to love on and be compassionate for a person who stays stuck in that mode. But all you can do is continue to love them, and you don't have to accept that what they're, where they're keeping themselves is a good thing. But until they are willing to take responsibility for the way they're thinking and open the door to possibly changing, they won't move from that place. And that's a very stuck place. That's part of the benefit of being around others. I think that there's so many support groups. One of the things that you can learn from support groups is that other people are mirrors of you. And so as you're looking out, it's hard to look in. We don't, especially if we don't want to take responsibility or we don't think we're responsible. It has to be somebody else's fault. It can't possibly be, how I've been thinking or what I've been doing that's put me in this place. So when you're with other people, they do mirror you back to yourself in ways that if you can move yourself to a more open-minded place, you start to see truths that are difficult to accept at first, but it's encouraging that you're not the only one. You can see in this handful of people, in whatever group you're in, that there are others like you. And the ones that have acknowledged, that they were in X, Y, Z kind of a place, but here they are now, gives one hope. And that lifts you into a place where the door might open now to say, okay, well, maybe if they can do it, I can do it.
Can you give us some specific examples as to how changing our thoughts can apply to changing our lives?
Yes. For about 6 months, I worked with an individual on my team who was a mother of 3 children. And this was in direct sales, and she would make about $300 or $500 a month. And so she was having a modest amount of success. And after 6 months, she sent me a 5-page letter apologizing left and right about how she had made this decision to leave the business, and how she used to look out the window at all these cars of neighbors driving to work and feeling jealous this other life, and what she learned after 6 months of leaving her home to go out and do a little direct selling was she didn't want to leave her boys. And she felt bad that it was going to be a negative impact on me because we always make a small commission from anybody on our sales team. And so she was just apologizing left and right and had labeled this as this negative kind of decision. And I had a conversation with her that I viewed a tremendous success for her. She had not only earned a couple of $1,000s that made her life easier, but she learned something that many people go through their entire life never knowing. And she learned that she was right where she wanted to be. And so that relabeling, instead of being this failure at this direct selling thing, or I disappointed my boss, she got to label it as a successful journey. She made some money, she learned where she wanted to be, and now she could watch people driving to work and happy for them, but knowing that she was content and could stand in that sense of contentment with her family right where she was. That's an example for me of putting a different label on something that allows us to not really change anything other than the way we view it. And now we've got contentment and happiness instead of regret and this, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that, all that negative stuff. And when, we always say when mama's happy, everybody's happy. Her whole family, I'm sure, benefited from that shift in the way she thought about that.
So we can obtain contentment by changing the way we see our circumstances. Are there other things that may change about our actual circumstances when we change our thoughts?
Sometimes, not always. There are people around us that can still refuse to change how they're doing, even though they see that we are a different person. But in general, we are beings of energy, and energy attracts like energy. So when you walk around moping, you attract other mopers. There's a wonderful story about a person who was crabbing. And when you put one crab in a bucket, you have to put the cover over it because the crab tries to escape. When there's more than one crab in a bucket, do you know this story, Tina?
No.
When there's more than one crab in the bucket, you never have to put the lid on because the other crabs try to pull down anyone who's trying to get out.
Wow.
And so that is a great visualization of what negative thinking, it attracts other people. And so there's whole groups of people who are all mopers and toxic thinkers and complainers, and I don't associate with people like that. As soon as I see that that's how they're thinking and it's not just a day that they're having a bad day, that's just their general way of going through life in this negative place, I disassociate myself with that person or with that group, and I go to the people who are making positive change in their own lives and in the lives of others by finding ways to label things in a positive way, or looking for a lesson, something that I can grow from this, or at the very least, looking up to God for help when we don't understand what's going on and we just are going to surrender to His will and, lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3, I always love verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. So you've got to have this open mind, this listening mode, and looking for a lesson or a positive way if you're going to be receptive to the Holy Spirit for God to direct our paths. He is, but if we stay in a negative mindset, that door is closed between you and Him in general. And we don't receive the clear direction He would love to give us, because it's our free will to stay negative if we want to.
That's a very important point. Our spirituality is the cornerstone of who we are and how we think. If we close our minds to receiving the guidance from God, then we are truly closed from being able to be led into blessings. I love the other thing that you said as well, making sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who think and live the way you want to live next. Putting yourself in the presence of people who are going to help you grow, not people who will pull you down. I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that people can learn more about this by staying connected with you and following you. And you also have a memoir that people can access. Tell us how to find that and how people can stay involved with your ministry and the things that you are doing in your amazing work.
Well, thank you, Tina. My website is chrismanion.com, Manion, and Chris with a CH. I have a blog there, but a little one for some cooking and recipes, and the other one is just my thoughts, and especially on writing and compassionate living, and a little bit on leadership. My book is God's Patient Pursuit of My Soul, and that's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it's also an audiobook, so you could find that on Audible and get that free. If you want to try an Audible trial membership, you get your first book free. So those are the best ways. I'm also on Facebook. My author page is facebook.com/author Chris Manion. LinkedIn, I'm at c.manion, and in Twitter, I'm at Chris Manion Book.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad that people have these resources available and they can stay connected with you, possibly hire you as a speaker or get your book. I hope that all of you listening will stay connected with Chris Manion and her brilliant wisdom as a mentor and as a speaker and as an author. And I hope that all of you also will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.